Jesus, scared jump scare.
Um, Welcome. This is Betsy Cunningham, and this is Southern Oregon Progressive or Populist podcast, or Progressive Populist podcast. Um, and we are here tonight with, I guess we're going to call you a panel. You want to introduce yourselves, Zach and John?
I'll start first. Yeah, I'm John Hunter. I'm with Community Rights Douglas County, and I'm on the board of the Oregon Community Rights Network.
And I'm Zach Whitworth, graduate teaching fellow in history at the University of Oregon, born and raised in Roseburg, and involved with the Institute for Social Ecology in Vermont. Always happy to be here.
And I'm Betsy Cunningham, the co-host. There's actually supposed to be a co-host, and he may join us sooner than later. Not necessarily tonight, but maybe next week. We'll be back in the phrase back in Oregon, and Kevin Bell. I actually have a variety of hats in the community, but the one that I probably most focus is actually what we're going to talk about in our topic tonight about Housing First Umpqua and some things that's happening with that organization. And we're going to let Octavia Sanchez, who is our community outreach coordinator that's trying to help us revitalize the outreach efforts that we've kind of put on hiatus for the last couple of years. So, Octavia, you want to introduce yourself more and tell us what you're going to tell us?
Hello, my name is Octavia Sanchez. As was said, I'm the outreach coordinator for Housing First Umpqua. And one of the ways that we are revitalizing the Housing First Umpqua project is we are making a video series debunking common myths about homeless people. We also go out and we do physical outreach. Today we were with Team Smiles and we handed out the Homeless Herald, which is written by Betsy, which describes current events regarding homelessness and politics. There was even a blurb about the SNAP or food stamps issue that's happening right now. Yeah, I'm drawing a blank. Jeez.
So the video project, and then we're doing some social media. Right, we're improving our social media besides Facebook. We will have various social media accounts so we can keep up with doing outreach in various platforms to get more folks involved and aware. Do you remember, Octavia?
Yeah, we're gonna we're revitalizing our website so that everything is going to be on there, including this Mythbusters video project, which I am working on. And we're gonna probably be having, we probably are gonna be doing like an Instagram account and stuff like that.
And we have the arts and activists. Our advocacy that happens on Wednesdays. We have drop-in office hours at Frog Lake Studios from 1 to 4:30. Somebody's actually going to start serving soup on that day. And that's an opportunity for people to just drop by. They can hang around, do some art stuff, get access to services. What else are we doing?
I teach, if they want to, I can teach them how to draw whatever they want. Because I'm an artist myself.
Yeah. And one of the reasons that we started that is, for one, we had the ability to work with Max Smoot at Rock Lakes to have a venue in which to do that. But the other is just because of in the years that I've done outreach, I have run into a lot of artistic people that are living outside. And I think that there's, sometimes a need for people to have a connection to the community besides just, you know, being homeless. We also, for a while, we're trying to do the garden at the community garden project. And so all that stuff is trying to just have some things that folks can do besides always having to deal with the unfortunate realities of being homeless. So what else are we doing? Harassing the city council.
Yeah, as a council. We are also pretty soon we're going to publish a video that we filmed of someone named Joe who was in the Bernie Woodward camps. It is 10 minutes long and is pretty much an expose on the issues going on there. Like for instance, they're making disabled people do hard manual labor. Bernie is. And
Or Elk Island LLC, whichever persona it is.
yeah, yeah, we're going to be doing that, and we are trying to find more people who are willing to make more videos talking about their experiences in the Elk Island LCC camps.
So, and we're also involved in there's going to be the Sunday after Thanksgiving, a soup feed with Team Smiles at Gaddis Park. And then Food Not Bombs is also joining in that. They're going to bring ham and turkey dinner. So we expect probably of 100 people. So there's, it's kind of a community effort. And Housing First Umpqua is also on Homeless Memorial Day, which is the 21st of December, the longest day of the year. We're going to have a recognition of those who have passed away because of being homeless, either at the time or, something related to it. And that's going to be in conjunction with Team Smiles. And and it's a nationwide thing that happens. So anything else that you can think of we're doing in outreach?
Not currently at the moment because of issues with the weather.
Yeah.
We,
So that's
we were
true.
we were down at it wasn't rain today, but we did go down to the point, and there's not just garbage everywhere, but it was also super muddy. One woman had dug a trench around her tent because it kept flooding. So it's not looking good down there.
Yeah. And before we started recording this, I had mentioned that it's actually keeps getting worse. And uh, is wonder if it's even, if it's intentional. It's to the point that I don't even want to take pictures about it because it's such a hot bone of contention in the community because nothing gets done. And but in reality, I think people should go and look and think about what's wrong with us. Not what's wrong with the people that are living there. What's wrong with us that we don't do something better than that for our fellow human beings. Um, so, anything else about housing first?
Oh,
So the big thing. Go ahead.
we are looking for volunteers to help us do some of the more paperwork office type stuff for us. So if
And outro. Oh yeah. Go ahead. Sorry.
so if you or anybody else is interested in helping us in that way, we would really appreciate you and them connecting with us about it.
Yeah, the big thing I forgot, is for one, Jamie Sanchez, who did one of the programs when we were talking about the executive order a few months ago that Trump signed regarding homeless. She has actually have been doing some research to kind of analyze where the city of Roseburg is, where the county is in regard to housing and homeless. We'd hoped to have that report done and published, by this month, but it's probably looks like it's going to be the first of the year that we will have that. So that's kind of a major analysis of all the services, the successes. So we're looking at the kind of data that probably should have been looked at before. And one of the things related to that is Octavia and I, and actually a couple other people, have been doing surveys to get a check. And so we will be releasing that data, which will most likely be released by the 1st of December. This kinds of things. We, asked them about their circumstances, their needs. And the one thing that Octavia and I were discussing and taking about, and one of and one of the main myths that we used for some of the outreach we did at the Douglas County Fair, as well as Blocktoberfest, are the two events we've been to, and we had a myth busters, kind of, these are myths about homelessness. And the main one that we see keep coming up and up is kind of the topic here we're going to talk about as well, is this idea that homelessness is a choice. It is very frustrating to me after all these years to people keep equating that people, the choices that we have are is the same as someone who is in the situation, say, living at Deer Creek, or what Octavia referred to as the point. The kind of, what choice really means. So you want to do that? Want to talk about that?
Yeah, with our surveys, one of the myths that's in conjunction with homelessness being a choice is the idea that they don't want to work. What I have found is that on most of the surveys, the people who could work wanted us to help them find work. The only time that wasn't there is when it was somebody that I knew had a severe disability of some kind that they can't work.
Mm-hmm.
And the other thing I also noticed that the main thing about it is they are not given the option to be self-sufficient. So you're going to argue about choice, but then you don't give people the tools they need to efficiently live like that. If you're going to argue, if you're going to make some argument extrapolation about why you think somebody might want to live like that, they don't. It's theoretical, but you don't even give the tools for that theoretical to maybe come to fruition.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I think even then it would be a fallacy to assume that anybody would want to live outside on the riverbank of the South and River in Roseburg in the dead of winter.
Yeah.
Okay, and this idea right now, there's signs go in town that say no camping in city parks. The problem with that is people are not camping, they're living outside. And that's the other thing we were actually involved in too, is trying to help get some signs for folks who are actually living there so they can put the yard signs up by their tent and basically express that sentiment that I'm not camping. And so we kind of like to play down and use euphemisms like camping instead of living outside or homeless, right? That's really not recreational camping. And I understand, the nuance of the term camping, but I think it really does a disservice. Just like you and I, Octave, were talking about how, even people who are out there helping people, and actually it was one person who brought this up, and in the context of a conversation, they were talking about people who want to just live outside down on the South Umpqua River. And I, say what I normally say, point out that person to me, let me have a conversation. Because they were telling me that they had, that people have told them that they want to live outside. Um, and so if anybody who's in the room wants to kind of join in this discussion about the topic of choice, please chime in. And your take on it. But I think that you have to have real choice. I think there have to be options um, to really for that cognitive process of actual choice being valid to even raise as an argument.
Mhm. The question of choice uh, uh, brings a lot to my mind. One key thing, though, is if we were to say someone really might choose to live in the outdoors in the middle of winter along a riverbank in the middle of an urban area. I would think that if to the degree that that would be a choice, hypothetically, it would only be because somebody is escaping or looking to escape conditions that are intolerable otherwise. That could be escaping surveillance, that could be escaping abuse, that could be escaping uh, enslavement in a wage system, staying away from work, obviously, which is not the case. And historically speaking, there's no real way to do that anymore. There is nowhere to escape to. And prior to at the very latest, maybe 1950, there are places in the world, even in the United States, where someone could flee to. During the 19th century, a lot of black enslaved people in the South fled plantations and headed to the coasts of like South Carolina, where they lived in swamps and marshland that were hard to get to. And people had developed customary knowledge to be able to forage and survive in those kinds of environments. People do not have those same kinds of skill sets in order to do that anymore. And the encroachment of surveillance, policing into every corner of the globe is to the degree that there is nowhere to escape to. Even if you wanted to, even if you chose, if you, hypothetically, to uh, escape the bounds, to escape the chains of waged labor, to escape predatory housing, predatory landlords, to escape the police. There's nowhere to go. There is nowhere to go but to simply live outside in squalor. The claim about it being a choice, speaking as an historian, is not considering that there historically is no real way to choose to do that anymore.
Well, it's actually, Zach, you mentioned escaping abuse. We we met a woman actually that was from Glendale that had come here because she was trying to get away from her abusive husband,
Mm.
and we don't know what happened to her. But one of the issues was is that she was thinking that she was going to have to go back to her abuser to be housed because she realized that there was a lot less than she thought there was on the streets and as far as social services go.
Mhm. Yeah, that Octavia, you're definitely right. That there are people who are escaping abuse, but the places that they have to escape to are not real refuge, places of refuge. They're not places of asylum. They are the streets and riverbanks in which people are living in muck.
And right now, that muck is literally true, right? And so to say, go down there right now and say that really this is a choice. I mean, the people, and the one thing, years ago when actually um, Feed the Berg used to be at Eagles Park, right in downtown. And Dr. Dannenhofer, who's our public health official, had, happened to stop by. Somebody was ratting out the people who were giving away free food. And so he was coming down there because they were complaining to him as a health department officer. So we know each other, and we started talking, and he said I've been talking, I went down, along the river and talking to people, and met some guys who said, yeah, they wanted to be down there and they like living outside and that. And I said, point them out to me. I said, seriously, show me who they are. And I bet you in 2 minutes, they're going to tell me they would rather have a house. Okay. Because, well, for one thing, I want to reality check. Why would anybody answer your interrogation when you walk to them up to them off the street, right? Would you, if somebody, said to you, hey, what are you doing? Where do you live? What kind of job do you have? We would probably have a few expletives to remind them that they had crossed a boundary. So, and I said, and this is particularly true with men who, see that even as a confrontation, right? Particularly they're living on the street. So they might just tell you anything just to get you away from them. And so I said, so really, and over again, when I've had conversation with people, then sometimes do say, oh, well, it's not too bad living out here. They come accustomed to where they are, particularly when it's summertime, right? It might not be too bad. That's absolutely true. And for me, I mean, I, have been homeless camping myself, had a lot more supplies, had a car, had other things, but I certainly in the summertime, it's a way to, we did it once waiting for a place, right? So that is, cheaper, heck of a lot cheaper than a motel room, right? For
Yeah.
one. So that may be that kind of choice, right? That there is that little side of, okay, well, these are my options. I'm not choosing to live here forever, right? This is not something that I see is in the choice. And the concern I have is when do-gooders or people who really, understand the politics of homelessness, want it solved, don't like the inhumane treatment, when they even fall into believing that. It actually is one of those things that kind of then negates our responsibility. Or worse yet, we then blame them, right? We're going to have to force them, to get off the street. We're going to put them in, what they say is being built in Utah right now as an internment camp for homeless.
Mhm.
Well, Betsy and I have encountered at least two people I can think of that are doing really good things for the community, even if it's just giving out meals that have perpetuated that sort of myth. I think it's because you want to seem like you're being honest intellectually when really you're kind of when really you're kind of both side but like oh but both sides argument type stuff, and you just when you say that you just really want to avoid that in general.
Mhm. So speaking of internment camps and similar things, Octavia or Betsy, could you speak more to the developing situation surrounding what is it, the Elk Island Trading Group?
Yeah.
Well, I'll start it off, then she can add what she might. As Octavia mentioned, is we have this um, uh, 10-minute video from somebody that had started coming to Food Not Bombs events, and then was expressing concern about what he had to do to work there, and work to live there in order to live there. And so they connected him with me, and we started talking. And when I talked about it, when he talked about what it was, it's kind of things that I've already brought up before, is that they're violating, I believe, the Oregon minimum wage law. And also I've had a couple conversations with the Bureau of Labor and Industries regarding the same thing. And so, and they seem to indicate, based on the information I gave them, that they in fact were, plus they have to have workers' comp, they may be violating some other laws. And this was some months, actually even a year ago that I started, I think, I reached out to the city a couple of times and tried to say, hey, what's going on? They're not supposed to charge a fee. And they are charging a fee, in my opinion, in lieu because they're making people work 3 hours a day. And so the thriller twist, I'm not going to reveal everything Joe said,
Yeah.
but it is the kind of stuff that we pretty much thought was happening. And so with Joe, when we did the interview, which was a couple of weeks ago, he was still living in the encampment. And at the time, he was very nervous and he didn't even want to file the Bureau of Labor and Industries complaint form while he was still living there. And not too long after the interview, and I don't know if people knew he was coming to Food Not Bombs. We don't have any information. Joe had apparently gotten kicked out of the camp one evening, and and I was never able to talk with him again. He did stop by to try to find me. I wasn't there, and he was supposed to come back the next day. He didn't. People have looked around town and have not seen him. So we're assuming, hopefully, that he went back to where he had, been from when he came here, which is what he had told us he wanted to do, and what it was trying to get his way out of not just the camp, but Douglas County, because his biggest fear was that he would be kicked out of the camp and he would have to go someplace like Deer Creek. And so you want to know anything more, Zach, or Octavia, you want to add something?
I was curious about, you mentioned also at a somewhat recent city council meeting,
Yes, I did.
what you were seeing could be described as labor camps.
Yep.
They are.
Yep, that's what we called it. Go ahead, Octavia.
So they are, like I mentioned earlier, they're making people with disabilities do hard manual labor. There's a very very disturbing story in this video we did of Joe. I won't tell it right now. You'll just have to see it when the video comes out. And there's also been other, and also he does things like actively prevents people from trying to go get a better job if it's not within his designated time frame.
Mhm.
And he has rules about you can't talk to this person or that person like us. Don't talk to us or you're at risk. And it's very like it is very disturbing, I would say.
Mhm.
And I think the comment that I may have made at the city council is it was human labor trafficking.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Because it really does smack of that. Because um, there's more to it than, the kind of labor. One of the big problems is we certainly don't see any problem with somebody living at a camp being required to clean up after themselves, right? Or even being required to help, maintain that. That is relatively common in many places. The problem is a 3 hour mandated set aside to work, and then you don't get paid for it. And that work is not mostly about the camp itself. And sometimes I think they've done some what they call, kind of civic, community service, including help clean up in after places have been swept. Other homeless people, has been swept, and they then help pick up and throw the stuff in the trash. Um, but also in the private for-profit enterprise of the principles of Elk Island LLC, and the potential misuse of a 501c3 nonprofit that was created to get donations for people who live in the camp, certain supplies. So there's a big old mess that's going on that, that needs, if anybody really likes to do research, they can also get in touch with us because there's some other things that um, we can uncover and needs to be uncovered regarding this whole problem with the Elk Island LLC and what's happening. But at this point, I think the city is equally responsible for that exploitation. They actually provide a funnel, for this labor camp because they're sweeping, right? And remember what I said about Joe. One of his fears would he'd have to go there or he would be chased around, right? And that is one of the two would happen if he stayed here. So I'm assuming he actually did go back, where he was from.
Yeah. What you used the term trafficking. I would say also this strikes me as economic refugeeism.
Yeah.
That
Yes.
and there's a term that actually a pretty well-known scholar frequently on frequently interviewed on TV. It's Naomi Klein, who recently has been recently publishing some new books. Something that she's very well known for is this notion of disaster capitalism and a shock doctrine of using disasters, and that could be climate disasters, but it can also be economic disasters, using those to advantage profiteering interests. A large multinational corporation might move into a devastated zone and exploit the vulnerability of a people who have been laid to waste by one kind of crisis or another, sometimes even created by those kinds of companies themselves. And on the small scale, that seems to be what's being described. This is the crisis of homelessness is an economic crisis, and it's not just a federal level on down. It is also rooted in how municipalities like Roseburg treat housing in law, how we organize our own economy in small towns and counties. That's creating refugees, clearly, who are still living in town, just by the river and
Yeah,
elsewhere.
we use similar language. We call them refugees of capitalism.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And you're absolutely right, Zach, because unfortunately, it is focused a lot on the housing, the lack of affordable housing, but the reality is it's the gap between housing and income, right? That people just don't make enough under our system. And I'm assuming that they didn't make something, that the problem, the model that Bernie Woodard is using and the LLC is using has to do with the fact that they can't support this kind of system, right? The management and the providing these services without making money from somewhere.
Mm-hmm.
And the conundrum is if you want a staff heavy oversight of people who were living outside, then somebody has to pay for that, right? So in this perverse way, this is now the way it's paid for is for him to or them to make money off in another way, right? Instead of just getting paid. A nonprofit might go in there, get a grant, right? The grant's going to have all the staffing, right? Every single cost. I think there might be some rental agreement or something over there by Maselli Park. I don't think that they own it, that let the property there. So if there's some rent, right, or and the overcost of the stuff they're supposed to provide, sanitation, and then who is, monitoring. Yeah. I mean, the option is that you have that model that is either public or, nonprofit generally as a rule. And it may be creative, but it really looks like it's illegal. And even if it weren't, to me, it's unethical. I mean, I think, this is a real moral failure that we even condone this. And some people say, oh, well, he shouldn't he work? I don't think, and there's a lot of people that I respect that say, oh, look at these camps, aren't they good? Because, now people are doing something productive. And they don't quite get it that, wait, he's illegally charging these people by making them work for a camp space, right? A tent space, a porta potty, a dumpster, you know. Wait a second. And if you look at it, what minimum wage is, what, 14.05 in Douglas County right now, I think. And so if you look at it, it's roughly like $45 for 3 hours, right? A little bit less than that. And think of what you're buying for that $45. We have way better campgrounds. I mean, let's be real. I think you can even tent camp over on the coast still for less than $45 a night, right? Even at like the county park there. So it's kind of ridiculous, and it's I just can't, believe that we allow it to happen. And at this point, not just the time that I went to the city council a few weeks ago, month or whatever it was ago, and brought it up there, I have written emails to the community development person because that's who's the one that oversees the encampment, and asked them. And at one point I said, they said, well, we'll have to ask our lawyer about the fee situation. And then they went radio silent. I mean, not even responding to my emails or acknowledging that they existed. So, that's what usually when someone does that, when someone's asking those kind of questions, it's there's just no point in answering it because you know yeah, so but that
Betsy,
makes me more suspicious. Go ahead.
you touched on, and I would like to hear Octavia's thoughts on this too. You touched on this kind of celebration that some people have of the Bernie Woodard's Elk Island Trading Group and what we're describing as labor camps and trafficking schemes. Why do you think that this is something that has been praised, even by certain people who I believe you just said you have respect for?
Well,
I,
I think it's because it's a mis it's a misunderstanding that comes from Bernie's propaganda that intentionally lacks nuance, right? They think, oh, but they're working and doing this. It's like, but it's on average they work like 21 hours a week, which is a part-time job. And they aren't just like, people phrase it like, oh, they're just like cleaning up trash or whatever, but that's not what's going on. He's making people do damn near impossible task for no pay, and then he's also getting angry. He's also getting angry and belligerent with them when they try to refuse, when they refuse to do something because they're afraid they're going to hurt themselves or whatever. It's just like, oh. So I think people believe that there's something way more wholesome going on than there actually is.
and they want to believe.
Yeah.
I think really this is sometimes a delusion of wanting to believe, and if you only hear one side, and people who might even go to the city council who are in those camps, I've heard them praise it, right? There are some people who are willing to accept their exploitation, don't know it exists, and the fear on the other side, because Joe is not the only one who expressed this. There are a few other people who told me their stories. And basically, at this point, one I think has recently moved out and may be willing to do something about it. But that fear also is if their housing isn't stable, they might end up homeless again, right? So I don't know, but some of them that are there are very much like Joe was, saying, I don't want to do it because for us, even though we could, expose who they are, um, I wouldn't do that. I mean, we think that that's kind of an unethical thing, that we have to respect the fact that they trusted us with this information. And it is up to them. I'm glad they told us their stories, but it is up to them to decide whether it goes public. So, but I think we're living under a delusion. We so bad want something to work. And I will say one kudo about Bernie's effort is because these three camps don't have problems, right? There's not a lot of police involvement like with Deer Creek. There's not that there's no problems that I know of from the neighbors. I personally know somebody who lives like right near the Misselli Park camp, and I asked them, and they said no, there's no problems. They never have any problems with the people that live in that camp. So he actually has kind of validated the ability for that to happen, not the exploitation, but actually have those encampments that people are living at, and they're not a problem for the neighborhood. So, he has actually helped that cause, but everything else is problematic.
Right. Because how has that legitimacy of the camp form been established through
Good point.
through exploitation, coercion, and a kind of small scale authoritarianism, it sounds to me.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, and that's a good point because, well, but Housing First Umpqua's proposal is, we call it safe ground. And we don't like urban campground. Again, I don't really like that name campground either, because people are living there, but it is based upon a self-governance model with what we call community support.
Yeah.
That we believe, and we saw evidence of this when the pandemic hit and everybody was left alone outside, that there were these smaller groupings of folks that were encampments of say 20. And I had me and another person with Housing for Umpqua, Mary, did a lot of outreach and talked to people, and they, pointed out, well, the people that do this are over there in this part of town, and the people who do this over there, and we don't want them in this camp. But they were able to a very pretty good degree, I think, separate, right, and then coordinate stuff. So even like when people would come to give handouts, because this was in the pandemic, and that service supply had kind of halted when everything else did initially, and then Housing for Some was, it was outside, and we said we at least need some kind of sanitation supplies, information to folks, and started doing that. And some other people were doing outreach. But so, that just kind of, and I had those dialogues with people about what if these encampments could be permanent, not here on the river, because I don't know that that's a sellable thing to the opposition. I don't even know. I don't know if you can get a compromise, just let them be where they are on the river. But they pretty much cleaned out the area by Misselli Park. I don't see anybody over by Templin Beach area where people were. But over here, when you go down the bike path towards Gaddis, there's people on the riverbanks there. But and we would agree with the general population, and even because our environmental, concerns, we don't think that's a good place for people to be. And it's not even practical if somebody has to live and have some stability outside. But our camps would really prefer they not have 100 people in them. We prefer, because it becomes more authoritarian, more like that, internment camp kind of stuff. 20 people can figure it out, right? They're more likely to self-manage, without too much assistance from other people that could help them. And Housing First Umpqua is one entity that could help them learn how to do that. We have the expertise to organize tenants unions, that kind of stuff that I have done. and organize people for other stuff. But it's easy, I think. I think it's easier, even with Hastings Village in Sutherland. I did have a few conversations with the folks there on how to make decisions, and you know, it, democracy doesn't, and justice doesn't mean you can just not put somebody in because you don't like them. That's one of the things you have to overcome sometimes. Is this subjective opinion? Is this fair? Right, kind of thing. So, anything else?
John, do you have
Octavia?
anything you want to talk about or ask about?
Yeah, just
Oh.
about the housing stuff, because I'm gonna then shut the recording off and
Well, I
do
know
another one.
I if just suggested if these mucky areas around their camps and everything. This is some if that has helped in the past on construction jobs is bales of straw scattered around their campsite can do an amazing job of controlling the mud and making the situation around their camp a lot more tolerable. That's just something I mean it doesn't resolve the homeless situation, but it really helps with the muck.
Well, and it raises a good point, because we are putting a plan together. We had in the planning that we did about what we thought Safe Ground could have, looked at the components. We had already done that. And so even with right now, there's a group that is interested in saying, okay, just let people be there, but address those infrastructure problems. So I know nothing about that side of it, right? What would you do to deal with that muck? Because you obviously have to do something about it. Because the gut, I think I'd mentioned before that the mayor had, I don't know if he was being flippant or something. He said, well, why don't we just let them stay there, meaning Deer Creek Park, right? When the urban campground was nixed the last time. So, and if people have, the expertise, because I think if we could mitigate that kind of stuff, I mean, is that viable? But, they are already there. And I don't know that they're ever going to get rid of them, because where else would they go?
Yeah, I mean, I live that on construction sites when we're working on the foundation, and then the winter in the mud. I mean, the mud would get intolerable, and just get a few bales of straw and scattered around, and it was amazing how fast it could alleviate the problem. I mean, it was still it was still wet, but but it really controlled the mud. So it's kind of a relatively simple solution. I mean, if they had straw scattered around all their tent sites and everything, it could help a lot. And maybe you get donations of bales of straw or something.
Yeah.
It works better than chips.
Well, they're probably easier to live on too.
Yeah.
Straws probably than chips are, or gravel, because that was the other thing that we were
Yeah.
thought, would they put gravel down there? But I'd actually hate to see them gravel that much area of the park, because let's hope to God this is not a permanent housing solution. That is not the intent. So, any other comments, Octavia? You have something else you want to say before we get off this topic and move on to?
No.
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 Anybody else? We all done with this?
Nothing more from
All
me.
right. All right. So I'm gonna stop the recording for this one, and then I will